No one is saying that a referee's job is easy, but for today's video, we're going to be taking a look at some examples where mistakes were undoubtedly made. Shocking stoppages, poor submission awareness, and everything in between, these are some of the biggest referee mistakes in MMA. The Nightmare Debut. You only get one chance to make a first impression, and for Benoit Saint-Denis, his UFC debut could certainly be categorized as disastrous. Sure, Saint-Denis took quite a beating, but in that fight, he still showed a lot of talent and a lot of heart. His opponent, Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos, was no easy challenge, and though he ultimately came up short, no one could question his will to continue. The problem here was that the referee in question allowed the fight to continue for far longer than it should have. Saint-Denis was taking extraordinary levels of damage, as dos Santos battered him comprehensively through the middle portions of the fight, but somehow the ref in question refused to stop it, leaving Saint-Denis in there on the strength of his fighting spirit alone. When the bout was over, dos Santos was, of course, declared the victor, but what was truly interesting here was that Dana White immediately moved to have the referee pulled from the show.
We've removed guys on the middle of cards too, but this was pretty bad. Horrible.
Thankfully, in his next outing, Benoit Saint-Denis proved that he belonged in the UFC, taking home a second-round submission victory. The Von Flue choke. If you don't know what you're looking for, a Von Flue choke is going to be pretty hard to spot. But if you're a referee in a live cage fight, it probably would be wise to look this one up, especially for the sake of a fighter's health. And for Chad George, who was already quite busy with the task of defeating his opponent, a choke attempt from Mark Vorgas that was held on to for too long left George with the perfect opportunity to use the technique against him. After tying up his adversary's choking arm and pressing down with his shoulder, Chad George applied the Von Flue choke, which, again, if he knew what to expect, should have been noted by the referee. Thankfully, George himself knew the choke was deep and immediately read that his opponent was unconscious, posturing out of the submission before turning to the referee to tell him the fight was over. What's insane about this one is that while George was literally standing over his downed opponent telling the ref that he was out, the official in question was repeatedly answering, "No, he's not."
No, he's not. No, he's not. No, he's not. He's out!
You couldn't script a more bizarre ending, one that saw Chad George forced to win the fight, protect his opponent from further harm, and call the contest to a halt. The Bulldog choke. Speaking of UFC debuts, the first time we saw Ben Askren make the octagon walk was truly a chaotic affair. Not only did most people completely give up on the idea of seeing Ben Askren compete in the UFC after retiring 2 years prior, but the idea of him being a threat to the welterweight title, even then, was quite a long shot. But to say his debut was thrilling would be putting it lightly. With Robbie Lawler as his opponent, Askren was immediately put under intense pressure, eating a barrage of wild strikes from the former champion, and almost getting finished by him at one point. But out of nowhere, Askren started to recover, eventually tying Lawler up, making his way to the back, and eventually securing a Bulldog choke. He went from the brink of defeat to a dominant position in the space of just a minute or so, and when the referee Herb Dean stepped in to call the fight after Robbie went out, it marked one of the all-time great comebacks. The issue? Well, Robbie wasn't unconscious.
That's tight. Oh, he's going out. He's out. He's out. He's out. Ben Askren submits Robbie. He wasn't out. He wasn't out. Oh, he wasn't out.
Herb Dean had mistaken his arm dropping as a signal to end the fight. So even though Askren had done incredibly well in turning the tide, there was an awkward feeling in the cage, and one that ruined what was a pretty incredible round of action.
When he checked, I gave him the thumbs up and looked right at him. I was like, hey man, fuck, I'm good.
The single leg. Although the sport of MMA has evolved dramatically over the years, the old-school one-night tournaments were truly something to behold. Sure, these days, commissions wouldn't be as quick to sanction a type of event where fighters compete multiple times in one night, but it was pretty good while it lasted. And for the legendary Pride icon Kazushi Sakuraba, his first appearance in the UFC saw him take full advantage of the tournament format. His opponent was Marcus Silveira, a 240-pound Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt and just the second test of his professional career. When the fight kicked off, in one of the early exchanges, Sakuraba took several hard shots to the chin, but not fight enders by any stretch. In the middle of the onslaught, Sakuraba found his opening to shoot for the legs, trying to snatch onto a single leg to turn the tide. Unfortunately, Big John McCarthy saw this and interpreted the quick movement as the Japanese fighter losing consciousness, and subsequently stopped the fight. His mistake was as clear as day once he made it, but sadly, there was no going back. Thankfully, because of the tournament format, Sakuraba was given the chance to rematch his opponent just a few hours later, and this time he came away with the UFC Japan Heavyweight Tournament title, catching Silveira in an armbar just over 3 minutes in. Justice was served on that day, but this remains one of the biggest referee blunders you'll ever see: the eye poke TKO. During Anthony Johnson's early UFC run as a welterweight, he managed to add an incredibly strange loss to his record, a controversial referee blunder that is really in a league of its own. Facing Kevin Burns in 2008, Johnson was forced to deal with repeated eye pokes from his opponent before he would be rendered unable to continue due to a cracked retina in round 3.
And Johnson's so quick, you don't have time to bring those hands up and block.
Literally just straight up in the air.
He's using those push kicks well.
He's landed some nice shots.
Oh my goodness!
Looked before as if that uppercut landed hard, but it did not. It's the poke entirely.
If that wasn't bad enough, the referee in question, Steve Mazzagatti, declared Burns to be the victor of the bout by TKO. And yes, you heard that correctly. The fighter responsible for the repeated eye pokes was given a finish victory on his record. Naturally, Johnson attempted to appeal this verdict, but was sadly unsuccessful. However, true justice was served in their eventual rematch 5 months later, where Rumble scored a knockout of the night winning head kick to settle the score. The Filipino Wrecking Machine. Mark Munoz is a real fan favorite, known to us all as a genuinely nice guy who just so happened to be a world-class middleweight fighter. And for those who turned in to watch him put his 4-fight win streak up against the rising contender Chris Weidman, the bout's conclusion was an especially tough one to watch, given how easily it could have been avoided. After taking a massive elbow to the face from the All-American, Munoz was all but finished there and then. But for some reason, the fight was not called off, and Weidman was forced to hammer down with at least 15 strikes that went completely unanswered.
He rocks him on the way out. He is out. They're going to stop this fight.
Josh Rosenthal, who was the referee that night, was rightly criticized for his slow response to the finishing sequence, leaving Munoz to take far more damage than he ever should have.
I could see from way up here this fight needed to be stopped. As a matter of fact, I was yelling, pleading, and begging. I don't know what took so long. Mark Munoz and all athletes are counting on that referee to keep you safe.
And while it's hard to know how much of an effect it had, Munoz was never the same fighter afterwards, going 2-3 in his next 5 bouts before retiring from the sport in 2015. This was the fight that earned Weidman his first shot at Anderson Silva, but for most of us, it was also a bout that left a pretty sour taste in our mouths: the tap. Bad stoppages, whether they're TKOs or submissions, are rarely overturned by athletic commissions. So when this 2015 submission was eventually declared a no contest, it goes to show just how bad the stoppage actually was. Drew Dober has really started to make a name for himself in the 155-pound division after a slow ascent towards the top 15. But during his earlier years, he found himself as the victim of one of the most baffling stoppages in MMA history. Facing Leandro Silva, Dober found himself in a pretty tricky spot, fighting off a tight guillotine choke from his adversary. Make no mistake, it was a nice attempt from Silva, but as the commentary team correctly stated, Dober was doing everything correctly and had just managed to pull his head out and escape. At that exact moment, just as he had removed his neck from danger, the referee jumped in, thinking he had seen a tap, ending the fight there and then. Dober was understandably quite confused about what had just happened, and fortunately, the no contest due to the referee's mistake saw the bout stricken from his record. As always, if you guys enjoyed the video, please be sure to let me know by leaving a like and subscribing to our channel. Apart from that, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.